Well, thank you very much. So one of the things that RISAs do and GLISA tries to do very specifically is also to try to understand a lot of the things that we learn in the process of increasing the usability of climate science. So a lot of those lessons are very practical in the sense that we want more people to use climate information, and therefore we want to learn what are the best practices to get there. But we also want to learn, what science can we create in this meta relationship between science and policy, and how those new models of science and policy relationship can actually be transferable and create, robust science for us to understand what to do, not only in climate or not only in adaptation, but in general. So this is a picture of a paper. So all the beautiful pictures that I'm going to show are, the sole authorship is Dr. Christine Kirchhoff, who works with me in all those papers, and it's very creative visually. I won't claim any of them. So this is a picture of a paper that we published last year, and the other co-author is Vijay Ramprasad. And in it, we are trying to make a very marked distinction between what's useful and what's usable. We think that, in general, most science that is produced in universities these days are useful because people want to produce something that society can use for the most part. So even if they think of themselves as very basic scientists, in the back of their minds, they're always trying to think of a solution that might benefit from that science. It's very rare these days that you have a completely, basic science that doesn't think about. I don't know anybody. Well, maybe I know a few, but but I know more people who are thinking about how their science can be useful. What scientists don't do for the most part is that there is a difference between what they think it's useful and what people know it's usable. And we don't know that because we actually rarely talk with the people who are actually going to use our science. That's changing as well, but there is a burden of doing that. And we are not very good at universities at this point to navigate that burden, how we reward these kinds of things, or how at least we don't punish them, which is, is the other side. So there is a lot of discussion on how we make things more usable. And projects like the RISAs are actually trying to systematically, go through this barrier and try to create a structure that is friendly for people who are, who are very interested in increasing the usability of their science to operate into. So what have we found? So this is mostly based on empirical data. And what we found in this and what we propose is that, interaction does really increase usability. When scientists talk to users, we have very robust evidence, and we've seen on some of the projects that have been just presented here, that the rate of usability goes up. We also have learned by examining some of those interactions and looking at the literature and some of the original research that we have done ourselves, Christine and I mostly, that the things that are the main barriers for use of knowledge are this idea of fit, and we have discussed that a lot here. So how does the science that is available fit what users think they need and know they need in many, many times? And the other is the idea of interplay, which is something that has been less examined in the literature. Interplay is a very simple concept, how new knowledge interacts with old knowledge. A lot of decision makers we know are very set on their ways of making decisions. Those decisions have worked for them, and they just like them. So something new that comes about can be very disturbing. Some communities are very risk-averse on the way that they make decisions. And unfortunately, a lot of those communities are the ones that we want to hit. So how does the new information interplays with the old information is also a very important factor. So this is a little bit what we are going to talk here is how GLISA sees itself as a boundary organization. So we have seen a definition of boundary organization. Thank you, Adam, because I actually don't have any text on my presentation today. So that saves me the work of defining it. But boundary organizations, I think they have been appropriated by the language of bridging. But boundary organization was actually created originally to protect science from politicization. So a boundary is something that actually puts a barrier between the science and its public. So scientists were very concerned about, the imposition of users on their science. And boundary organizations were actually created with this idea. What people have found through transformation, social transformation, is that once you create something that is in between, that in between can be both to protect but also to bridge. And so boundary organizations have been reappropriated in the sense of being actually bridging organizations, and they do both. And sometimes by bridging, they protect, because not everybody actually is born with the gene of stakeholder interaction. And those people have as much right to do science as any of us. And therefore, I think that there is this dual role for boundary organizations that they help on both sides. So this is actually a picture of another paper that we wrote and that has been submitted to other comments in society. And we are sort of pushing for an idea of what GLISA has tried to do is slightly different from what RISAs have tried to do. And I'm hoping that Adam will correct me if I'm wrong. But not only the small projects, but also this idea that rather than building those relationships from scratch, we are actually relying on other boundary organizations to do part of the work for us. So what is the idea here? The idea here is that interaction works, and one of the reasons that interaction works is that through interaction you can build trust and legitimacy for your information. Okay, so that is in general. But building trust and legitimacy is something that can be extremely time-consuming, costly, and emotionally tasking sometimes. Rejection is not something very easy to deal with. So how do we eliminate or mitigate some of those transaction costs by relying on organizations that actually have done that before us and have built those relationships before us? So building those boundary chains, we call them, it's a little bit of a pretentious thing, but we like it. So how do we do that? By not thinking of boundary organizations as one bridging, but actually one of many bridges that you create through society to disseminate your information. So one of the models that you had seen a very good example with the presentations today is what we call the key chain boundary model, in which GLISA is one chain, maybe the originating chain in terms of producer of knowledge, and then all the other projects are other keys on that chain. And it has a little bit of this fan look to it. The other model is the linked chain arrangement. We are very creative on the way that we are trying to differentiate key chain from linked chain, but So I have to also mention that the other co-authors in this paper is Christine Kirchhoff, Rick Root, Don Scavia, and Scott Calafatis. So all this great brains to come up with this distinction. And so what we have done here is that we thought about the linked chain, how it's different from the key chain, is that it's actually a longer chain of boundary organizations. So one boundary organization trains another and trains another and trains another, very closely to what Rebecca was describing with their own Rome River Partnership. Now they are training the trainers, so so it's a way of dissemination and cutting transaction costs. And this is where we want to be. So Dr. Scavia came up with the moniker is the Borg. The Borg design, because resistance to you be futile, so that's for the second generation of Star Trekkers. Maybe many of people here are too young to remember, but the idea is that through those relationships we can actually create a robust structure in which those networks become efficient as disseminators of information. And it goes back to a little bit of the question that I asked Adam before. So how do we actually maximize the very few resources that we have, but especially human resources? It's amazing because the most valuable commodity that we have Now it's time. It's not even money anymore. Money, I'm not saying that we have a lot of money, Adam, but money is short, but time is really a constraint. So how do we maximize it in a way that we can guarantee some robustness to what we are doing, but also hit a larger number of users that we are hoping are coming out from everywhere? Okay, thank you.